Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. You are currently part of the session, attending the session Double Time, Building an Enterprise While You're Still in School. Hopefully that is the session you meant to join. If not, you can go up to the left-hand side, click on Agenda, and pick on the session that you should have been in. But hopefully you are where you are supposed to be. So we're really excited to hear from our panelists and our moderator today. Startup Boston is in its 5th year. And we have spent that 5 years building community because a lot of us have come from startups, and our lead organizer, Stephanie, just went through what a lot of you are going through, right? Which is that there's nobody else but you a lot of times when you're a solo founder, or maybe you're in a little bit of a bigger company, but you're the only one who does your job. And so we created Startup Boston for you to have community and for you to meet people and to learn things and really focus on education and getting the insights that you need to be successful and to build up the startup community here in Boston. So thanks for joining. And I also wanted to say we have a fun contest that is still going on if you haven't heard it from some of the other sessions. So pay attention to the session, quote some of the things that you're hearing. If you can put the quote on social media and hashtag it SBW 2021, they will enter you into a drawing for one of $500 gift cards to a local Black-owned business. So we're really excited about that, and hopefully you'll get to win one. So with that, thanks for coming again. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to kick off.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. So hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Tang, and I'm a senior at Boston University's Questrom School of Business. I'm also the founder and CEO of CleanSea, a BU and MIT restroom hardware startup that has raised $375,000 of funding to date. The topic of today's discussion is double time, building an enterprise while still in school. How does one student do it all? How do they find and inspire the right people and mentors to join them? Today, we will be discussing about collaborations, balancing academic and startup life, major accomplishments, and much more. And we'll be open to some questions at the end. Today, I'm joined by our panelists, Amira Hamuda, a graduate of Boston University, 2018, and Diane Yuen, a graduate of Babson College from 2015. Why don't we start with some quick intros so everyone can kind of get a feel for who they're hearing from. Why don't we start with you, Diana?
Hey everyone, my name is Diana, and I am one of the co-founders and current VP of Talent and Operations at Indico Data Solutions. We started back in 2013, 2014 when I was still in school. I was a sophomore, and we actually went through Techstars, I think soon after that, which allowed us to raise a seed round and then kind of really got us going. We recently raised a Series B at the end of last year, $20 million, which is really exciting, which has allowed us to grow to around 65 people right now. So that's been great. Oh, and I should also maybe say a little bit about what we do. So we're an intelligent process automation company. So enterprise SaaS, we're helping financial services and insurance organizations automate their highly manual document-based processes that use unstructured content. So Word documents, PDFs, things like that. We can help automate their contract analysis and invoice reconciliation processes and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Diana. Let's go on to Amira. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, to everyone for being here, and to Startup Week for having us. My name's Amira Hamuda. I'm the founder of Amira, which is a modest women's wear brand focused on sustainability. The brand is very fresh. It just launched this summer on June 26th, but it's something that was actually cooking up during the pandemic. So I can talk a bit about what it's like building a team virtually. And I got my roots started in BU when I had a jewelry line, and then I ultimately decided what I wanted to do was get into clothing, and that was the inspiration to start the brand Amira. And yeah, that's a bit about the brand. I am a solo founder right now, but I've learned a lot and can talk a bit about what it's like to grow a team and, crowdfund.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, Amira. And I'd like to remind everyone that we do have a Q&A section, I've been told, on the side. So if you have any questions, put them in there and we'll get to them kind of near the end. But yeah, with that, let's kind of get started with the conversation. So One of the first questions I had was, what are some of the advantages of being a student starting a company as opposed to someone who may have graduated or might not be in school? Why don't we start with Amira? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think luckily I was able to, have that jewelry company while I was in college. And I think two of the main advantages in college, the first being your access to community. I mean, there's no other point in your life where you're going to be surrounded by, I was a business student, but I was surrounded by engineers, graphic designers, musicians, comp sci people, all sorts of people. So you have your web designer right there, you have your engineer right there, everyone's around you. So it's a lot easier to get the help you need when you have all these students that you could, build this idea with together. And at the same time, you have all your mentors, professors, whoever it might be. So I think that's the first access to community when you're a student it's much more accessible. Obviously, when you graduate, you make connections, but you have to reach out a little bit more. And I would say the second thing is there's a lot less risk involved. Any startup is going to be risky, but when you're a student, there's obviously less financial risk in the fact that, in college, you're either on a scholarship or, you're going to pay off your loans or your parents are paying for your education. So you don't really have, the adulthood financial responsibilities that you might have after you graduate. So I think that becomes a worry when you do graduate and you're starting this business, but when you're in college, you're not really thinking about that. So I'd say definitely starting in college is a huge advantage when you're a student, and I would say go for it if you have an idea.
That's right. Have a higher risk tolerance. Cash is king. Just remember that. So, actually, I wanted to ask a little bit more about something you said. Like, you're talking a lot about community. I have to say, I agree a lot with that. I went to Boston University also. Amir graduated from BU, and I constantly go to people in different disciplines and ask for their perspectives. Can you tell me a little bit more about, for your company specifically, what were some of the different groups you went to, and what was their contribution to your company and your ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I had the jewelry business in college, and I think I reached out a lot to my business professors to kind of get idea about what I should be doing. And it was a lot easier because instead of now, I'm still in contact with some of them, but it's all email. I would just go to their office. And I think too, I worked with a couple of artists in the CFA. It's our art school at BU, as Kevin knows. So I worked with a couple artists there. I think, with the jewelry, I wasn't so focused on making it this huge empire as I am with my current business. So I think I didn't really reach out as much as I could have, but now definitely I do have a small team of 3 other women, and one of them, is a communications major. One is a fashion design major, and the third is a graphic design major. So that's kind of my team now. And so that could have been my team in college. So those were some of the disciplines I worked with.
Right. So looking back, you can see that there's a lot more people that maybe you're not interacting with now that you did have the opportunity to reach out to. And also you perhaps had some professors or experts that you could really easily email and they'd shoot you back an email quick, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The student email is a huge advantage. Even when you graduate college, definitely people are always willing to help students. So use it to your advantage.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Diana, on to you.
Yeah. I definitely agree with everything Amira said. I wanted to reiterate the student card works very well. I think and the reality is that usually people are just trying to sell you things. So I get emails all the time and someone's ignore. But, if someone reaches out and is like, hey, I'm a student from, this college, I'm looking, to ask you a couple of questions about this area. Do you know if you have 20 minutes to chat or something like that? Insert a little bit of flattery there and it will go a very, very long way. And I think you could really get into contact with really anyone. I think using the student card, reach out on, LinkedIn, emails if you can get it. Just using that kind of avenue to make connections is really works a lot. And I think that point that Amira hit on, which is, I think you have a little bit more flexibility as a student, right? There are some life things you don't need to worry about as much, which allows for you to spend time in other areas. So I think that's also huge. And I guess another advantage as well, in addition to making these connections, is I would also say, like Amira said, college is so unique. Like you're in this like pressure cooker of all these people with unique talents, and also doing like group projects, which is a perfect way to test like how you're going to work with someone. So I definitely recommend using the experience to, find people who could potentially be on your team, or, people that you can then, work with in the future, even after you graduate, and like form those connections earlier.
Right. Yeah, Diane, I think you bring up a great point about using the student card. That really caught my ear, because I know for my company specifically, we use that card a lot, actually, to try to get in touch with people who otherwise wouldn't really be the kindest to solicitors, let's say, right? Maybe can you give some, I know we have a lot of students in the audience today. Can you maybe give some practical advice as to how do you reach out to these people and use the student card? And I know asking for advice is a really big component of that. There's a whole like what was it? Ask for advice, get money twice.
Exactly.
So also tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So for me personally, what I really like is, short and sweet, no, paragraph of like what we're looking for. You just want to send enough information that shows you've done your research on the person. Like you're not going to waste their time. Right. So it's like, hey, I know you have expertise in this, or, I talked to somebody else. If you can name drop, that also helps too. Like, hey, there's a common connection we have. They recommend I reach out to you because I'm interested in this. I'd love to talk to you and get your feedback on X. So like having a specific ask, and I think is very, very key, as well as, what does this look like? An email, like a 20-minute phone chat, I think making it very clear what the ask is key. And then also, I would also follow up as well. So follow up, I wouldn't follow up like immediately a day after, but give a couple of days and follow up, because these people are usually busy, and, follow up a couple times and usually you can get through. But I think those are kind of the tips. I wouldn't go as far as, like including a deck or anything like that. Like just maybe insert a little bit about what you're working on, but the idea is to just get them interested in talking, and then you can engage with them there.
Right. And then they'll ask for the deck. Hopefully that's what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the position I'm in.
And, while we're on the topic of forming connections, I know right now we're talking about forming connections with, let's say, industry professionals or advisors who, maybe you need to use a student card for. One of the groups I don't think you have to use a student card for other students, right? So maybe let's talk a little bit more about, forming connections and looking for partnerships with other students or organizations that may be within the school ecosystem. So maybe, can you guys tell me about like when you guys were undergraduates, what were some of the partnerships or the groups or clubs that you guys were involved with, and how did they help you along your journey? Let's start with Amira. We can start with Amira.
Great question. I think so. Naturally, being in the fashion brand, and one of the things actually for anyone whose university might not really have the education for the industry they want to be in. I mean, BU had a great business school and I received a great education, but I knew I wanted to be in fashion, but wanted a traditional academic experience. So that's why I didn't go to, Parsons or Pratt or whatever. So that being said, I was super involved in the fashion club at BU and the fashion magazine Off the Cuff at BU. And they did events where I could go promote my jewelry brand and met people who, were interested in fashion. And to this day, some of them are still connected as customers, or they're on our newsletter or whatever it might be. So I think, college makes it very easy for you. There's, organizations, student groups, there's sports teams, there's whatever it might be. And you just have to find the niche that would be interested in your business or your idea, even if you're maybe looking for teammates or whatever it might be, and then go meet those people and find those people. And that's how you start building relationships, because each one of those people knows 10 other people. And, that's kind of how it's going to domino effect like that.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, actually one of the things you made me think of, me being an undergraduate myself, I think oftentimes the connections that you make with your peers or people around you to the sides is kind of like underestimated, because the reality is that like, you're, 3 years out of college. I'm going to be out of college pretty soon. These are all going to be people who are going on their own paths and being experts and professionals in their own fields, right? Can you maybe tell me a little bit about how those connections that you made as an undergrad are still valuable to you today?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, they're super valuable. I mean, I think connections with both my peers and, professors, my coaches, whatever they might be, I'm still in touch with most of them. I mean, I'm not that far removed from college. I like to think I'm not that old yet. But yeah, I mean, I've had, friends or peers that I met give me advice or, tell me about someone in the industry to connect with, whether that be a manufacturer or, another fashion designer. I've had friends connect me with fashion designers that I, just had a little, like Diana was saying earlier, asked them for advice and, got their feedback on my business and the idea. So everyone's connected to someone somehow, and you would be surprised, like your secret engineering friend might actually be very well connected in the fashion industry or whatever industry you're in. So definitely just stay in touch with people, don't lose those connections. And on the other hand, it sounds now like you're talking take. Also make sure you can give back. I have students reach out to me asking me questions about my business or whatever it might be. So it's kind of like a take and give, and just we're all trying to help each other out.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think the idea of giving is really important as well. I'm like, if you give more, that's ultimately what's going to allow you to take more in the future, hopefully, or get more from or collect more from your network. But yeah, let's move on to Diana. Tell me a little bit about some of the partnerships or student groups that you engaged with. I know you went to Babson, which is a very entrepreneurship or business focused school. So I'm super interested to hear about what kind of resources you had and leveraged.
Yeah, so Babson had a bunch of resources. I was heavily involved with eTower, which is a student organization that has like a living space. And yeah, to live there, typically you have a business. They also have a bunch of resources that the school sponsor, like the Blank Center, Center for Women in Entrepreneurship. There's a bunch of resources, but I think the one thing that I guess is a little different from Babson, and like when I think of a school like BU, is that is a bit of a bubble and we're all like business majors, right? We also got like accountants and finance people, but it's like I think we had people who, as a passion were maybe doing fashion and also starting fashion businesses, but it's not like, we have an art school and a design school, right? So for me, it was all about, building connections within the school, but also trying to reach out to like other schools. So I met my co-founders through a Babson Olin Wellesley class. So my company, all the technology is based off of machine learning. I'm the technically non-technical co-founder. So I met my co-founders in like sophomore year in this affordable design and entrepreneurship course. And the class itself was sponsored and was passed down from basically semester to semester from the classes. And there are 9 different groups. Each were given a different geographical area. There's like a team of Ghana making cassava graters, team in India building rickshaws. And I was put on a team for the Southern United States, and they were doing hero bikes. And so, like I mentioned, group projects are a really good example to really learn how you work with people. And so I actually met my co-founder through this class, working really late at night, trying to get these, posters done and final projects done. So me going out and actually getting more exposure to folks with more diverse background was the most helpful to me in terms of like really finding a great founding team. Because I think that's another thing is when you're building a great team, you want to find people whose skill set complement yours or like are things that you don't really want to do, right? So you got to be careful about hanging around too many people that are too similar to you.
Right. I think that's great advice. And that's actually really interesting. I didn't know that you met your co-founders in class. I can tell you certainly we did not meet our co-founders in the same class. They're in the engineering college. I'm here in the business school. I don't wander over to their classes all the time, but I'm glad we met. But actually, while we're on the topic of co-founders, you're giving some advice about, not having, I guess, like too homogenous of a thing set, right? Maybe what are some of the other things that you looked for in good co-founders? And actually one thing that like I know a lot of people are always, asking me is, how do you know when you found the right co-founder? That's a really big thing, So yeah, maybe you could tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I feel like this phrase is used a lot. I use it and I think it is true, but it is kind of like entering a marriage a little bit. And so there's actually like, basically you want to go into the relationship really trying to understand the person, not even like, so skill sets definitely on a fundamental level, also career pathing, right? Like what does this person, see for themselves in the future? But it's also more on a fundamental level, right? Like what does this person value? What do they care about? What are their morals and ethics? Because the reality is when you start a startup, shit's just gonna happen. Like situations are just gonna come up that you can't, even think about or even like talk about. Like, hey, if this happens, like how would you react? No. So in order to be comfortable, you just need to understand the person and figure out, cool, if we get into a crappy scenario, like, do I trust this person to like make the right decision and have my back, or like make the right decision for the company? So getting into like, actually, I think what's most helpful is actually deep, philosophical conversations. And if you can even throw out hypotheticals, that would be useful, right? Like, what happens if, it all goes south and like, we got to give the money back or blah, blah, blah. Like talking through all of that as much as you can, but also making sure that you're spending enough time with them in like a non-strictly professional setting to get to know the real person and what they want out of life as well. Because building a business and entrepreneurship, I really think is more of a lifestyle choice, because it's not like you turn it on at 9 and turn it off at 5. It's just kind of there all the time.
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I like the fact that you're really highlighting, values and kind of like, what their principles are. Because, I think one of the things that people overlook for is what the skill set is. One of the things that you'll learn is that if a person is in generally the right discipline and they're motivated, they can pick up the skill sets, or they can you can find an advisor who will, just kind of give it to you for free if you ask very nicely, right? So
exactly.
I think that's something to think about as well. But yeah, actually, and I'd like the next question I have lined up a little bit more broadly about entrepreneurship. So, and kind of like everyone's in this panel's choice to pursue it. I know pursuing entrepreneurship is a very risky thing. It takes a lot of confidence, right? And it takes a lot of confidence, especially if you're in the business school, to not go on, let's say, like we're all from business schools, right? It takes a lot of confidence to not go down one of the more traditional career paths into, like, let's say, investment banking or management consulting, or what have you. And I'm sure that was an option to everyone here at some point. Can you tell me a little bit about the moment when you knew that entrepreneurship was the right thing? What was that win that gave you the confidence to say, screw all that, I'm gonna, pursue like this project which I'm really passionate about? Why don't we start with you, Amira?
Yeah. So I think definitely entrepreneurs are their own breed, like Kevin is kind of hinting at. I think two of the main traits of entrepreneurs are that they're very organized, of course, but then determined. And I think this might sound strange, but I think we're almost, the desire to be an entrepreneur shows itself from a very young age. I mean, at least for myself, in grade school, I used to set up shops at 7 a.m. and sell the weirdest things like clay creations or whatever. And people would buy them, obviously, because they felt bad for this little girl selling these, handmade pieces of junk. But things like that, I was always creating a business from like a very young age, not like a real business. But, and I think that's kind of in your personality. So if you see that in yourself, maybe you did stuff like that at a young age, then that alone should, kind of give you the confidence in your personality, because what child gets up at 7 a.m. and does something like that? Right. But then I think, of course, on a more serious note, I think for me, some of the, like wins that I had, I guess that gave me that confidence were, having my first sales to strangers was really empowering, because in the beginning, especially, with a tangible goods service, it's going to be mainly your family and friends in the beginning. But then when your first stranger buys something, you're like, whoa, okay, some random person found my brand and bought something. That's awesome. So things like that. And then also just holding on to your vision, because like Diana was saying, like things are going to go south all the time and things you wouldn't even expect, like she was saying. And so if you can just really always visualize and hold on to that vision and know that you're going to get to that point and even beyond that point with the right team, and, you know, after learning and with funding and all those different things. So just really holding on to that vision is also a really important part of, you know, moving forward and having growth.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And so what I'm hearing though is that that first sale to a complete stranger was the moment in which you kind of told yourself, hey, this is actually possible. This is not something that I can only sell to my parents, you know, right? Like other people are interested and want what I'm creating, right?
Yeah, I definitely, that was a big moment for me. And I think to just really getting in front of the customer, like being in fashion, I did a lot of pop-up shops and would, you know, set up shops in different retailers or at a fashion show or whatever it might be. And having customers come up and try the products and some of them buy it and, you know, provide their feedback gives you the confidence that, you know, you can see people's honest reactions on their faces, whether they like the clothes or not. And then also it gives you feedback too. Like someone might try something on and you notice something good or bad about it, whatever it might be. And then you can use that to improve your next collection and, you know, just keep getting better.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And yeah, so also onto you, Diana. So, you know, what were some of those wins that gave you the confidence to pursue your venture instead of any of the other number of career opportunities that were open to you?
Yeah. So our timing kind of worked out so that we started, it was like summer, basically fall of 2014. So I think that was going into my junior year. We got into Techstars. So we all took like the semester off. I was already ahead in credits. So I was able to somehow complete my degree. I like did all these fancy, like I did like an online course and I showed up for like one day to fulfill some credits. But yeah, so for me, I think similarly to Amir, is like I always knew I was going to do entrepreneurship. So like the thought of kind of working somewhere else, like it was always an option, but I don't think I ever really seriously considered it. And I think when Indico went through Techstars and it was after Techstars, like getting in was great. I think that, you know, instill some confidence, but it wasn't until the program ended and we were able to close that 3 million seed round that we were like, okay, like we really have something here. And yeah, we got some money. And obviously with that, you agree to certain milestones and you have to grow it. And so after that, it was kind of like, okay, cool. Like this is what I'm doing after graduation.
Right.
And I think, you know, it definitely is a risk, but in my mind, and I remember thinking about it, I was like, still a risky, like, is now the time to just kind of like jump in? And it was like, you know, I'm young. I don't see another opportunity like this coming. Like machine learning is like really hot. This was like 2014. So it was like the new buzzword coming up after big data. And I knew like the people I'd be working with, I really loved working with them and they were super passionate about it. And I did trust and believe that we could work through things together. So in my head, the risk was low because, you know, making enough to just support myself. Yeah. And I think I'm really glad I made that decision and decide to stick along for the ride because it's 7 years later, we've pivoted, whole new team, but yeah, it's growing like gangbusters right now.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just thinking, you pegged getting into Techstars as the first little nugget of win. That's a huge accomplishment, getting into Techstars. So I mean, like, that's kind of a really high, low first win. So you know, we haven't had the Techstars yet. We haven't applied, but I mean, like, you know, I can't say that. But actually, maybe I'm just wondering, you know, I know we have a lot of students in the audience. I know we have a lot of people who maybe want to get into Techstars but are looking to build a business or an idea that can hopefully get to that point. Maybe kind of like zooming into that period before Techstars. What were some of the wins that really convinced you that like, hey, this is an idea that's a quality idea and it's worth working on? Like I know in our case, talking to professors was really like a big thing, talking to them and just having them say like, hey, this isn't stupid. Like that was hugely motivating for me and our team, right? Maybe what was
Yeah. So the very beginning of the company, we actually started off as a bet. So we have 4 co-founders. One of our co-founders moved to an advisor in around the year 15 or 16. And so there's like 3 of us left still at the company. And the company started because Slater turned to Alex and was like, hey, if we can like close a certain amount of contracts in ML consulting, like maybe we should incorporate. And so I would say from that perspective, money and getting a sale and getting someone to pay you for something was definitely enough for us to be like, oh, cool, we have like, you know, something there. Afterwards, Rough Draft Ventures. So if folks have heard of that, I recommend, you know, definitely using that as a resource. But they were actually our first money. We bought Domino's Pizza, but we got $25K from Rough Draft Ventures, which was great. And that actually opened our eyes to the fact that like we could start even applying to Techstars and that existed, and we can kind of go down that route. And I believe I joined right before I joined the day they like applied to Techstars basically. And then they asked Madison and I to join as co-founders once we got in. And yeah, so I think taking a step back and I guess looking at it a little earlier, what really felt like we had something was that initial kind of traction. So like actually getting a sale, as well as I would say for what we were doing, the technology and where the space was going. So machine learning as a space and where it was projected to be going, we really were able to like ride that wave and, you know, raise an oversubscribed seed round on this developer API strategy.
Right. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. It's something that I'm hearing in common between you and Amira is that, yeah, traction is really, really important. And whenever you go to raise money, it's not that's going to be like pretty much one of the main things they're going to be looking at, you know, right? I think the business model comes secondary to knowing that people want your solution, you know, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, like on the topic of, you know, kind of like traction and, you know, validating these ideas and moving forward with entrepreneurship, taking a step back and thinking about this whole thing a little bit more abstractly, I'm curious, how did you guys come to work on your particular projects? Like, how do you guys like go about finding these ideas and even saying like, hey, I'm going to dig in and do a little bit more research? Like, where does that inspiration, you know, come from? Let's start with Amira.
Yeah, so I think it was, you know, the typical I'm solving a problem I have myself, and hopefully other people, you know, not hopefully they have that problem, but likely they have that problem, and hopefully I can solve it for them as well. So, you know, like I said, I always wanted to do this from a young age, but I didn't know particularly what niche I wanted to help. And then so it wasn't until I got older, I said, okay, this is a really difficult problem, finding, you know, nice quality, modest clothing that's comfortable, sustainable, and, you know, good quality. So then it was 2019 where I officially sat down and said, okay, I'm kind of anti-market research, but everyone's advising me to do it anyways, so I'm going to do it anyways. And so I surveyed about 300 women, and the research was, as I predicted, that it was a difficult problem. But I did meet a lot of people through the process, so I wouldn't, you know, belittle the market research I did at all. It was super valuable in the end, even though I was, you know, opposed to it in the beginning. And so that kind of was what sparked my interest. It was 89% of the women, you know, said they had a problem finding the kind of clothing that they're looking for. So that was an alarmingly high number. And that, I think, for me was the big thing that made me say, okay, this is a really big problem. And as someone being interested in fashion, I already saw the industry trending to cater to this customer. So that kind of created this urgency to create this brand before, you know, these huge, massive fashion houses were catering to this customer regularly. Because I said, okay, I understand the problem more than these fashion houses do, so I can solve it better. Yeah, right. So that was kind of, yeah, how that started.
Yeah, so breaking it down, what I'm hearing is that you started off as a disgruntled user. It moved into a quick Google search to see if other people resonated with that. And then ultimately, like the next step was you went and surveyed 300 people to see, like, you know, is this a concern that people around me share?
Yeah, exactly. And the women I surveyed were, you know, different ages, all over the country, whatever, and international. And so I thought, okay, this is only a problem maybe in the West because, there's not as many of the people I'm serving here, so the clothes don't cater to them. But I found surprisingly then the East as well, it was still a problem. So, that opened up maybe a potential market. I mean, I'm focused domestic right now, but maybe we want to go international in the future. So we have more research than, we were looking for.
Right. Yeah. And that's interesting. It kind of varies based on geography, even within the U.S. Right.
Yeah.
But let's move on to Diana as well. So where do you look for inspiration on these problems? And like, I don't know, how did you come to work on your particular issue?
Yeah. So we started, really around the ML technology. So, our founding vision and kind of why we exist is we really believe in the power of ML to really make people's lives for the better and help to accelerate and remove like mundane daily tasks that we don't really need to do anymore. And we can leave, humans, with brains and better cognitive loads to take care of, right? So kind of like giving people a bionic arm. And so we kind of got to that, that's always been the desire. We started off as a developer API because our assumption, our thesis was if we were able to create, out of the box machine learning models, we can put it in the hands of developers. They can go and build the next generation of apps. And that's how, we get the technology out. And for various reasons, we couldn't find the traction that we needed. And we also realized that we could be more impactful because we developed a technology that basically has bootstrapped the machine learning process. So with as little as 50 examples of contracts or any sort of unstructured content, folks can train a model on top of ours and basically get one that they can use in production. So it allows for folks to really accelerate business processes that they couldn't before. And we got to that after realizing, all right, API doesn't necessarily work. We actually first engaged with the innovation arm at a big financial bank. And we kind of had our first use case, which kind of pulled us into like financial services. Like, oh, we realized these are the companies that have a lot of these process problems because they have so many documents that they have to go through. So it was a bit of a windy road, but basically similar to Amira, we followed the data and we really listened to traction to our users and potential customers. We talked to, I remember, we also looked into law, recruiting. These are all spaces for various reasons. We were like, nope, our technology is not a fit for that. Like we also, because we're venture funded, right? We want to make sure we can get a big enough piece of the pie, right? So the TAM, or the total addressable market, has to be big enough for it to make sense for us. So bit of a winding road, but we finally got there. And it's all because I think we as a team were very realistic on, what was working and what wasn't, and going out and trying to find the data to kind of get us there. So in 2017, we made the formal pivot to an enterprise SaaS company and away from developer API.
Right. Yeah. So I was actually going to ask about that because when you're saying all that, I'm thinking I hear a pivot,
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, one of the questions I have maybe is like when you first started the company, it sounds to me like you had this general technology and you wanted to apply it somewhere, right? And you had the hypothesis that developers were the place to go first. Maybe can you tell me a little bit more about, why did you guys think that developers were the place to go in the first place? And then also, what led you guys to look into contracts? Because in my mind, that's not the immediate first jump between like coders and then, I'm going to start handling, contracts for financial institutions,
Right.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, great question. So how we got there is, I guess it's a little bit of, the team was me and developers. We were kind of the user, and we built a really incredible developer API that had a lot of users, which allowed us, to raise the round. But one of the issues we quickly realized, and we understood about ourselves as well, is like developers don't like paying for things. And if we wanted to go that model of like GitHub or DigitalOcean, we really needed to build an incredible product, which means raising a lot of money to pay for an incredible engineering team. And we knew as first-time founders, it would be a hard raise for us to do. So that means we have to figure out how to basically get money from our technology, right? And so the thread that we got from or how we got to contract analysis is all about basically this thing we developed called custom collections, which I mentioned. So enabling companies to create an ML model with a fraction of the data typically necessary. So we realized so it's all about figuring out the pain point, right? Because if you've hit a real pain point, people will pay for it. And so what we realized is that we started with small to medium businesses. The pain point wasn't big enough that we were solving. You know, we were helping to automate some things, but it wasn't like they were going to pay us enough that it, like, the economics made sense. And so a lot of, you know, POCs and trials, we realized that our technology is most impactful in organizations that have you know, millions and millions of documents processed for different processes. So, you know, we analyzed, I think, 20 million documents for one financial firm or a real estate firm right now. And so we realized that that was the real pain point that we were solving, and we could actually build a sustainable business model off of that.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm a hardware guy, so I don't know a lot about software. So it's super interesting to hear about how you guys went down this particular path. And I know in our case too, we had all sorts of like design pivots in order to really find, you know, a problem that was worthwhile addressing. Yeah. But yeah, I'd like to get back to a little bit, you know, the topic of the discussion is building an enterprise in school. You know, we were all students building these ventures. I'd like to get a little bit more back to that experience. And, you know, one of the things I'm thinking is that, you know, going through all these design pivots, building an enterprise, that's really hard. Being a student is really hard. I'm not sure the two mix the best, you know, right? Can you tell me a little bit about, you know, what was that experience for you guys? What were some of the biggest struggles you had, and how did you overcome them? How did you balance everything? Yeah, I'll name someone. Let's start with Diana. We started with Amira every time.
Yeah. No worries. Awesome. So man, so fun fact, I'm like the one co-founder with the degree. My other co-founders weren't able to complete their degree because they had required like intro to computer science courses and like a bunch of mandatory classes that was basically incredibly prohibitive. But because I mentioned I was like ahead in credits, I was like so close that I was like, all right, I should finish up this degree. It does make sense. I, at the time, was like, I don't know, maybe I want to get an MBA one day. Do I want to? I'm not sure. So that was like another option I wanted to have for myself. But the reality is like everybody gets 24 hours in a day. Time is super limited. And when you're running a business, it's, all the time. So for me, basically, what I recommend is you kind of have to make a conscious choice of where you're going to spend your time. And it's funny because I think if you look at my GPA and the amount of money my company raised, it's like an inverse graph. Like the better the company went, the worse my grades got. And so I remember going into my senior year, which was like, basically, I think I had 12 credits left. And I had like a reflection moment, which is like, okay, like, how much time do I need to spend on some of these things? And especially because a lot of the classes were just like required liberal arts courses, which are interesting, but when you're also running a business, you know, you gotta, you know, make some choices there. So the deal I made with myself is like, all right, I just want to leave with like something over 3.0. I'll be happy.
Right. And sorry, quick question. By this time, beginning of senior year, you know, was this before or after you guys had been accepted into Techstars? And maybe what was the funding at this point?
Yeah, so this was after we had gotten funding. The round closed in the fall of 2014. Yeah, so it was after we got funding. So I also knew like this is really happening. And so I can't remember. I might have even explicitly talked to a professor and like let them know like, hey, this is the situation. I'm enrolled in your class. I will, you know, give it my all, but like I'm, you know, off of campus the rest of the time. So if there's like extra group projects, like if, you know, we could work something out, like being communicative with the professors, they'll definitely work with you as best as they can. And there were a couple of, and I also was crafty and I took some online courses to just get the credits fulfilled. So I did that. And, you know, I think just being conscious of, where you're spending your time and what value you're going to get out of it. It's definitely tough. And unfortunately, I don't have like a simple, easy fix where it'll all work out. But it's definitely, I think, just, you got to make some, I think, tough choices and stay committed. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think hearing you say that, I think right now what you told us about was this very unique situation where you were ahead in credits, you're heading to your senior year, you were in Techstars, you had a lot of money, right? But you also described this as an inverse relationship where the funding went up and like the GPA, this was kind of like the tail end. Can you maybe tell me a little bit more about the beginning, like how when this idea was not funded and you were first working on it, what was balancing, handling this baby idea and still at that point trying to keep your GPA up? What was that time period like, and what were some of the some specific trade-offs that you may remember you have made during that time period?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I would say before, I think before then, obviously, it was a little bit more unknown. So like the GPA had a little more value to me, I guess, like prior to, us really picking up and things like that. I think a lot of the trade-offs came down towards, the types of courses that were picked. So I actually front loaded a lot of like my concentration, Babson calls them concentrations instead of majors. But I front loaded a lot of that to give me, honestly, I like learned all of the things I really wanted to learn early on, essentially, and just kind of like let all the required credits go there. I tried to be really strategic in the classes that I took in terms of like making, how do I put this? I'm sure people know that like some classes and some professors are known to be a little easier than others. So I was also really strategic about that.
My professor.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, definitely did that. And yeah, so I think, I was crafty in that way as well. And then again, if you can, like the summer courses, so I could like look, I forgot I did a bunch of that. I would lighten my course load so I could do a lot of extracurricular stuff. So I did a lot of student leadership stuff my first 2 years at Babson. And I was able to do that as well by like spreading out the courses by taking like 1 or 2 during the summer, which recognize not everyone can do, but if you can, that was really impactful for me.
Right. So extracting some like very practical advice from what you just told us, you planned very, very carefully and you lightened your course load strategically in proportion to how your workload was kind of like increasing from the venture.
And what I thought would be important for me to learn. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's great advice. I completely agree with it as well. But let's move on to Amira as well, actually. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like running your business during university? I think like before this, we were discussing how you actually were in a different line of business and how you had pivoted away from it, but nonetheless, you were, selling and operating in business in college, right? And it was a physical business too. It wasn't just a software thing. You had inventory, you were selling things. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that balancing act.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think like Diana's hinting a little bit at it. It's really about prioritizing and staying organized. And the other thing I'd like to say, it's cliche, I think, work smarter, not harder. I'm a big believer in that. Like, we do only have 24 hours in the day, but we also have so much distraction. I mean, if you really just shut your phone off, put your head down and work, like say, I'm going to study these hours, work on my business these hours, like you can get it done. And I think my schedule in college shows it all. When I was in college, I was also a student athlete. I had 2 jobs, both part-time, but still 2 jobs, and full-time school schedule, whatever. And then also working on this business. And yes, I did have a social life. So I really am a firm believer in that. But I think going back to being a student athlete, that helped me so much because I had a, enforced schedule regardless of whether I wanted it or not. And I think being an entrepreneur, and I'm sure everyone here has experienced it during this pandemic, if you don't have a set schedule, you can get a little lost and you start waking up at weird times and sleeping at weird times, and you might still get everything you need to get done, but it's not at the same level that you could have if maybe you knew, okay, I'm going to wake up at this time, these hours I'm doing this, and then on to this. So I think having structure is super important. And if you don't have something forcing it for you, like your coach or whatever, then create it yourself, time block your entire week or your month or however far ahead you like to plan. And I think, Google Calendar is a very powerful tool. You can ease a lot of stress off yourself. I mean, I didn't even know about these tools when I was in college, like simple things like Google Calendar, Mail Merge, all these things make your life 100 times easier.
I'm
Kevin,
gonna have to take a note on Mail Merge. I don't know what that is. I am a fiend for Google Calendar, but I'll have to look into that one.
Oh yeah, Mail Merge, Boomerang, they're lifesavers. Mail Merge is pretty much sending like mass emails that are personalized, but to like, I think you can send up to 1,400 emails at a time. So it's a lifesaver. So doing that, and then also like Kevin was saying, I did have a jewelry business in college, so not the business I'm working on now, but that did take up, a lot of time, but it was really just about like the time blocking and finding tools like that to make your life a little easier.
Right. Yeah. I'm hearing using a lot of these software tools, which exist to give you a bionic arm and really help your productivity. Right.
Yeah.
So maybe looking at some of those resources is really helpful. I would just say, like, just for me personally, because I'm a founder too, I'm kind of going through this at the moment. I'm actually missing class right now. But that's a separate thing. It was a boring class. I was going to miss it anyways. What I was just going to say really quickly, in terms of, Diana's planning that she was mentioning before, in addition to, planning your courses kind of around the work that you would like to get done and you need to get done, something else that you could think of quite tactically is kind of like how the grade distributions in those classes are. So sometimes it did make a lot of sense to take an L on an assignment that was worth 5% of the grade, and you could put in like a half an hour of work and walk away with an 85. That's just being smart. You have limited resources. You got to deploy it smartly. Right? Spend it on the midterm that's worth 30% of your grade. Right? So just a little bit of that.
That's a good
tip.
Wise.
Very wise. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing I was just going to say really quickly in terms of like how I personally allocate my time to work, and this may not be the healthiest thing, but I know it works for me personally, is that I spend a lot of time thinking about the venture, and I'm kind of at the point where like class is something that comes in between working on it, right? When I'm not in class, I am, kind of spending time doing research and what have you. And at least for me, it really became kind of like a habit. If you work out every day, you're going to probably continue working out every day. If you spend a lot of time doing research, emailing people, stuff like that, you'll just get used to it and it won't feel like it's this like extra project that, you have to work on, and I see someone just put in some resources for CRM. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But just kind of looking at the time, I think there's one kind of last question that I wanted to touch up on, which was regarding mentors. I will give a shout out. My first mentor was a professor from Tufts, and he also teaches at the Shaw School here at Boston University, Jay Mixter. Huge for me. I think having a great mentor is like just so essential to the entire entrepreneurship experience, right? So what I'm really curious about in the remaining time that we have is I'd like to hear about the most significant mentor or mentors, if you don't want to, not highlight everyone else, that you guys had. How did you guys find them? How did you nurture that relationship with them? And ultimately, how did they help you get the confidence and the skills necessary to become a great entrepreneur? Right? So why don't we start with Diana?
Yeah, so I think mentorship is really, really important. And, I definitely try to give back in that way, but also try to find mentors for my own. I definitely recommend folks really build kind of like their dream support team. And that should usually include like a mentor in there. So a support team as in like a support for you as a person and as a founder. So it's a relationship where you feel comfortable, calling them up and just, complaining about everything that's going wrong, which is like something that you can't necessarily do with all of your mentors and advisors or investors, right? So I think it's really important that you have a variety of mentors that can do a couple different things for you. So like one is like find a mentor that really has your back personally, that you really go to everything, even when things are going really bad. Like the person you would call when you're like, oh crap, this has happened. What do I tell my investors? Like, I just need to get this all out. Mentors that I would say are like 5 to 10 years ahead of you. So folks that you really want to learn from, but aren't so far removed that they can still give you pretty good practical advice. And then I also recommend like it's good to have I would say these are more advisors for your organization, but folks who are like thought leaders in industry, you engage with those type of mentors a little bit differently, obviously, because also their time is super, super precious and valuable and limited. But I think those are the types of relationships you can also lean on for, your business and advice as well, but at different levels. And I guess my other piece on mentors is it's very hard to build really good, long-lasting mentor-mentee relationships, and it's definitely a two-way street. So both sides need to be equally invested, and which is why a lot of times it doesn't work out because, one person just might not have the time to dedicate, to be honest. It might not be, maybe the chemistry is right, but there just isn't enough bandwidth. But you get most value out of these relationships if you are actually talking to them on a regular basis. Like a mentor isn't someone you reach out to once a year, maybe for some, but it's someone that hopefully you talk to more regularly than that. And it's kind of hard to build those relationships, but it just, takes patience, and following up and advice that's given.
Right. That's great. And I like that you're bringing up, once again, that's a two-way street. We were talking about before, giving to your network as well as taking. And I want to give Amira time to talk as well, but I wanted to make one point about the giving. And I feel like sometimes the best thing you can give to your mentor as a mentee is just being a great student, telling them that, or just taking the advice that they gave you, applying it and going back with actual results, say like, oh my God, you told me to actually reach out to people in my industry and not just like every investor I can find on LinkedIn. That's great. And look, it worked, right? I think that's something that they really like. They like that feedback. But I want to give Amira some time to talk as well. Tell me about your greatest mentor. How'd you meet them? How did you nurture that relationship? And what skills did they give you to become a great entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I have one mentor that has been there with me since, day one. And I actually met her. She works at the Build Lab at BU, so I'm sure most universities at this point have some entrepreneurial lab or whatever. I'm sure Babson is all like entrepreneurial labs. But yeah, if you look into that lab if you have one at your school. And she works there, but I actually met her through work, ironically enough. And she, like Diana was saying, we meet maybe once a month to go over things. And like Kevin was saying, the advice she tells me, I implement it, and then I come back with feedback and new problems to solve. So it's really important to, I think, like what Diana was saying, to have a few different mentors, like one who's going to be your business feedback mentor, and then you can have a mentor who's maybe more focused on creative direction, or, a personal mentor who's going to help you through the emotional struggles of being a founder, or whatever it might be. So, but yeah, my first mentor really helped me create and visualize, okay, what are the steps I have to do to actually make this happen? Because I kind of had an idea, having the business prior and studying business, but at the end of the day, every business is unique, and even your mentor's not going to have all the answers. So definitely don't expect them to be that for you. They're never going to have all the answers, but they have a lot of answers. So yeah, definitely find a mentor on your campus.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I take a guess of who it is, actually? Is it?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Is it Blake Sims?
No, it's Janice Osgood.
Ooh, I don't know her. I think she might. I'm thinking of the Build Lab staff. She might just be one of the mentors through the network, but that's good as well. But looking at the time, it looks like we're almost out. I was just going to say, last quick advice. Every university usually has their own entrepreneurship program. Just Google it. If you don't think you're getting the engagement you need, go find their staff and find their actual email and just email the director of it. That's what I ended up doing. Go on YouTube, watch lots of videos from Y Combinator. They have a lot of good stuff. And I mean, I'm open to it. I don't know I hope everyone else is, but you can drop me an email or find me on LinkedIn or something. I'd be happy to talk about it. My email is krtang@bu.edu. So yeah, that's pretty much it. But other than that, this session was double time, building an enterprise while in school. And appreciate everyone listening to us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. And same here. If anyone wants to contact me, my email is just my name @gmail, or you can go on the company website, which is also just my name, and contact us through there.
Yeah. I'm just gonna write
Are
my
you
email
gonna
right
post
here.
it? Yeah.
Anyone wants to
I can
email me?
post mine.
Throw it in the chat as well.
I check it all
And
the
you can
time.
also, find me on LinkedIn. Okay. Yay. Awesome. Find me on
Cool.
LinkedIn, or it's just Diana at Indico.io. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good
Thank
one.
you.